Please stand for the arrival of the official party. Please remain standing for the national anthems. Pascal Orchard will sing the national anthem of Israel, followed by a non-vocal ensemble leading the singing of the New Zealand anthems.
Sophie
Please be seated. E tū poki ahu e tāreho ana ki te kohu o Maumahara. E tangihi ana rātou ngā tini mate. E te toa matangaro e takota nei, haere, haere, haere. E te hunga ora, ko e huihui mai nei, tēnā koutou katoa. E te mana whenua, taranaki whānui, tēnā koutou. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to Pukeahu National War Memorial Park this morning for the National Commemoration of the Centenary of the Battle of Beersheba. Now I'd like to invite Rear Admiral David Ledson, Chairman of the National War Memorial Advisory Council, to deliver his prologue.
Among the many distinguished people here today, I especially acknowledge the Honourable Ron Mark, Minister of Defence, representing the Government. I acknowledge too the Honourable Paula Bennett, representing the Leader of the Opposition. I acknowledge Ms Heather Baggett, representing the Chief Executive of the Ministry for Culture and Heritage, and Mrs June and Mr Peter Jackson, representing Taranaki Whānui. I welcome the members of the Diplomatic Corps, and I acknowledge Mrs Kasa Harbour, Charge d'Affaires, representing the Ambassador for Israel. His Excellency Liasi Papali'i Tommy Scanlon, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, and Mr Andrew Cumpston, the Acting High Commissioner for Australia. I also acknowledge and welcome Councillor Simon Marsh, representing the Mayor of Wellington, and I acknowledge the Mayor of Pororua, who is here today as well. I warmly welcome Lieutenant General Tim Keating, Chief of the Defence Force, and Mrs Brenda Keating. I acknowledge too the Chief of Air Force and the representatives of the Chief of Navy and the Chief of Army. And I acknowledge Ms Helene Quilter, Secretary of Defence. I acknowledge Mr B.J. Clark, the National President of the Royal New Zealand Returned and Services Association. And I extend a very warm welcome to Jacob Messrs and Hardis Mayron, representing the youth of New Zealand and Israel. Welcome. After spending much of 1916 driving the Ottoman army from the Sinai Peninsula, in early 1917, the British Empire Egyptian Expeditionary Force, together with New Zealand's Mounted Rifle Brigade and Imperial Camel Corps, was ready to move against the Ottoman forces in Palestine. And in February, the British War Cabinet authorised the Force Commander, Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Murray, to conduct the Southern Palestine Campaign with the aim of capturing Gaza and then Jerusalem. The British first attempted to take Gaza by frontal assault on the 26th of March. They were unsuccessful. A second attempt in a similar vein was made on the 19th of April, but that too failed. As a consequence, Murray was sacked and replaced in June by General Sir Edward Allenby, who had just recently commanded the British Third Army during the Battle of Arras on the Western Front. By October, Allenby had re-energised and reorganised the Egyptian Expeditionary Force into 3 corps, one of which was the Desert Mounted Corps of Australian, New Zealand and British Cavalry, commanded by an Australian, Lieutenant General Sir Harry Sheva. Within that corps, Motueka-born Brigadier General Edward Chater, who had been wounded at Gallipoli, was promoted to Major General and given command of the Anzac Mounted Division. As well as the reorganisation, Allenby managed to get additional capability and capacity across his force, and his logistic support was vastly improved. In addition to around 88,000 frontline troops against the Turkish 35,000, he was given additional aircraft as well as balloon observation and wireless detachments to assist in the provision of accurate air-to-ground direction of artillery fire. Allenby also adopted a new strategy for taking Gaza. His initial main thrust was to be at Beersheba, and with that neutralised, he would then turn his attention to Gaza. Key to success was his ability to convince his opponents that he would stick to the approach employed by Murray. He therefore implemented a comprehensive deception misinformation plan, complemented by gaining dominance of the airspace. All of this effort would be capped off by the opening salvos of the Third Battle of Gaza, being not against his first objective, Beersheba, but onto his second and principal objective, Gaza. So it was that Allenby started things off on the 27th of October with a massive artillery barrage of Gaza from around 200 guns, complemented from time to time by British and French naval gunfire. The bombardment was to be maintained for almost a week. Then, on the night of the 30th of October, about 40,000 Allied troops made up of infantry and cavalry elements moved towards Beersheba and its 4,500 Turkish defenders, many of them veterans of Gallipoli. At 5:55 a.m. the next morning, a barrage against the town got underway. This was followed by an infantry attack which proceeded to plan, and by 1 p.m. the Turks were pushed out of their defences to the west and southwest of Beersheba. However, the town's wells were still in Turkish hands. Given that the countryside to the west and south of Beersheba was entirely waterless, and that the only water in the area was in Beersheba itself, it was vital that the wells were captured before dark. In the meantime, the cavalry action did not go smoothly, and the New Zealand Brigade of the Anzac Division had galloped into a major problem. The Turks had a strong defensive position at Tel Saba, a steep-sided, flat-topped hill 5 kilometres east of the town, and the battle to capture this did not end until 3 p.m. With sunset being around 5 p.m, this delay threatened to prevent the capture of the town and put at risk the original plan to launch a combined infantry and mounted assault on the town in the daylight hours. In order to turn things around, it was with some desperation that the 4th Australian Light Horse Brigade was ordered to mount a direct assault on Beersheba. This successfully turned the tide, and the Turks abandoned their defences and fled from the town, succeeding in destroying only 2 of its 17 wells. The New Zealand cavalry moved forward from Tel El Saba to the edge of Beersheba, reaching it by 6 p.m. Half an hour later, the town was firmly in the hands of the Desert Mounted Corps. The British now controlled the eastern end of the Turkish line, the security of Gaza was outflanked, and the defensive fortifications along the 48 kilometres between Beersheba and Gaza were exposed to the British and Anzac forces. The cavalry had proven to be the decisive factor, and their horses had performed superbly. Among them was a horse named Bess, presented to the Wellington Mounted Rifles by the people of Wairarapa. She was to be one of only 4 of the 9,988 New Zealand horses sent overseas during the war to make it home. Allenby initiated the final phase of his plan to take Gaza with an attack in the dark hours before dawn on the 2nd of November. After almost 4 days of fighting, the Turkish troops began to evacuate the town, and on the evening of the 5th of November, by the time the British broke through from the southeast late on the morning of the 7th, the retreating Ottoman forces were marching north, leaving rear guards behind at key positions along the road and in the nearby hills. When Allenby reached Gaza 2 days later, he found in front of him a city in ruins. but beyond it lay the road to Jerusalem. Of the Battle of Beersheba itself, Allenby was to write to his wife, "It was a smart little battle, achieved by careful preparation and good staff work. The cavalry made a 25-mile night march to turn the Turks' left flank, and the infantry did 15 miles and a battle at the end. All this was based on water supply and ammunition supply, the development of wells and pumps, and pushing in of roads, trains and railways, combined with secrecy and feints. All worked well. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa." I now invite the Honourable Ron Mark to deliver the address.
100 years have passed, but the Battle of Beersheba remains a meaningful event in our history. This was a spectacular victory, and one which marked a turning point in the Sinai-Palestine Campaign, paving the way for the victory of British-led forces against the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. Today, as we commemorate Beersheba, we give thought also to that wider campaign, though sometimes eclipsed in our memories by Gallipoli and the Western Front. This was a very significant chapter in the First World War. It was a feat of endurance, a long and arduous journey across the Sinai Desert and into the Levant, with no ready access to supplies, with men and horses alike falling victim to the elements. There were sandstorms, snakes, tarantulas and other deadly insect life. The troops slept in the freezing cold and by day endured intense heat and glare. Roy Bruce of the Canterbury Mounted Rifles wrote to his wife Maud, "I never felt anything like it. Gusts of hot air blew across and it was like the opening of furnace doors. It knocked a lot of men and horses out. I know what it is to be thirsty now. I never knew before." Yet they took hardship in their stride. In true New Zealand spirit, they had a job to do and they got on with it. Over the 2.5-year campaign, New Zealanders fought 14 significant battles against the Ottoman Turks. In battle, the New Zealand mounted troops were skillful, fast-moving, and along with their Australian counterparts, they were known as the Devils on Horses. This for their ability to strike without warning. They played a decisive role in many notable battles, including those of Romani, Magdaba, and Rafah, and all during the Sinai Campaign. In Palestine, they helped capture Beersheba, Yankara, Jaffa, and played a supporting role in the Battle of Megiddo in September 1918, which led to the Ottoman Empire's acceptance of armistice the following month. All this hung on the loyal service of thousands of horses. While hardy, they suffered the same deprivations and dangers as their masters, and deep bonds were cemented between man and horse. Sadly, transport shortages and quarantine restrictions meant horses were unable to return to New Zealand after the war, and many were shot rather than be left to an uncertain future. Something that affected many of our mounted riflemen for the rest of their lives. Only one horse returned from the Middle East, the famous mare Bess, who's just been mentioned, who lies near Flock House in Bulls with 2 memorial plaques in her honour. Due to the lack of shipping and riots in Egypt, it was not until the winter of 1919 that New Zealand troops finally came home. While they were not meant to sing their own praises, they had every right to be proud of their contribution. It has been said that the First World War started New Zealand along a path to an independent foreign policy. The New Zealand of 2017 is not a country that would automatically follow others into war. But we have learned many lessons from it. We're a nation that is committed to peace and to building stronger relationships with the Middle East. In pursuit of these values, we truly honour the legacy of those New Zealanders who fought so bravely 100 years ago in the interests of a peaceful and secure future. I hope that today's commemorations inspire a greater awareness of the Sinai-Palestine Campaign and our once unsung heroes of the New Zealand Mounted Rifles. These brave New Zealanders have a place in the Hall of Memories, and in today's commemoration, we will be rededicating their special alcove. Theirs was an important contribution to the outcome of the war, and a unique chapter in New Zealand and world history, and we will remember them.
I invite Mrs. Kasa Harbour, Chargée d'Affaires of the Embassy of the State of Israel, to give her address.
Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, His Excellency Lasse Tommy Scanlan, Minister of Defense and Minister of Veterans, Honorable Ron Mark, representative of the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Paula Bennett, Chief of the Defense Force, Lieutenant General Tim Keating, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, distinguished guests, Shalom, Kia ora. We have gathered here today to honor the soldiers of the New Zealand Mounted Rifles and to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice 100 years ago on this very day in 1917 during the Battle of Beersheba. Tel Sheva was a strategically important outpost of the ancient city of Beersheba. The Anzacs knew that in order to make this frontal assault of this historic and vitally important city, Tel Sheva had to be in the island sands. The cost of life for the New Zealand Mounted Rifles was high, and in total of 246 Kiwi soldiers were buried in Israel, including in Ramleh City, my hometown. Frank Tewelstone, a New Zealand soldier, described the capture of Tel Sheva in his letters home. Tel Sheva was a very brilliant action requiring plenty nerves and dash, and the Kiwi troops have plenty of it. The Battle of Tel Sheva was a defining moment in the war effort and of New Zealand's history, as well as a seminal moment for the fledgling state of Israel. For Israel, it was more than just a military operation. It was a battle that paved the way for the British mandate, which ultimately led to a British war cabinet setting down the Balfour Declaration, which called for a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. It was a battle that led to the emergence of the Jewish nation into the modern day as we envisioned by the biblical prophets. So today, 100 years after this most famous and historic battle, we have officially opened the Anzac Museum located at the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery in Beersheba to honor the soldiers who fought and died in the First World War campaign in the Middle East. New Zealand can be proud of its sons who lost their life in the battle. We here in New Zealand and in Israel remember them, mourn them, and respect their memories. I want to finish with a quote from a Jewish schoolgirl who met Kiwi soldiers for the first time in her life in 1917. I distinctly saw a large body of horsemen approaching our direction, looking from our balcony and watching the streets full of British soldiers. It seems that our dream at last come true, and we can already see visions of a new life. Among the New Zealanders you will hear the Hebrew words shalom and toda rabah, which means thank you very much. Both parties are fraternizing and are becoming every day closer friends. Indeed, this was the beginning of a long friendship between our people. Today, let us rededicate ourselves to remembering those men who gave their life at this most crucial, important turning point of our history. May God bless their memory. Yeh zichram baruch.
Thank you. Jacob Messrs, Deputy Head Prefect Wellington College, representing the youth of New Zealand, will now read Dreams in Palestine, a poem written by Bob J. on 22nd of August 1917.
As I sit in my little brown bivvy, I dream of a far distant land, where the rivers will run in the summer, and the beetles don't fall over the sand, where the lizards don't play on your blankets, where the louse is an object of scorn, where the flea is distinguished by absence, and the horses don't graze on green corn, where you don't always sleep in the desert, where there is such a thing as a bed, where you eat something better than biscuits, and don't make your cake out of bread, where the camel don't grumble and guzzle, and haunt you at night with his smell, where the germs and diseases don't stop you from drinking cold water at wells, where you don't have to shave with cold water, a face that is blistered by sun, where there is such a thing as amusement, whenever the day's work is done. Where there is such a creature as woman, a beautiful charmer or right, who you think of as sweetheart or sister, and take to the pictures at night. I dream that someday I'll reach Egypt, the opposite way that I came, when returning from Europe to Christchurch, or any old town that spells home. But some are not anxious to finish. They're having the time of their life, with their rank and their tent and their whiskey, and also away from the wife. So I dream of that beautiful country, a place where we all hope to be, when we've finished our job in the desert, and once more are crossing the sea.
Thank you, Jacob. I'd now like to invite Chaplain Peter Olds of the Royal New Zealand Navy to give the prayer of remembrance.
In Nui Tatou, we pray. Let us pray for all who suffer as a result of conflict and ask that God may give us peace. For the servicemen and women who have died in the violence of war, each one remembered by and known to God. For those who love them in death as in life, offering the distress of our grief and the sadness of our loss, may God give peace and cause us to remember. For all members of the armed forces who are in danger this day, remembering family, friends, and all who pray for their safe return. For civilian women, children, and men whose lives are disfigured by war or terror, calling to mind in sorrow the anger and hatreds of humanity. May God cause us to remember and bring peace. For peacemakers and peacekeepers who seek to keep this world secure and free. For all who bear the burden and privilege of leadership, political, military, and religious, asking for gifts of wisdom and resolve in the search for reconciliation and peace. May God give peace and cause us to remember. O God of truth and justice, we hold before you those whose memory we cherish and those whose names we will never know. Help us to lift our eyes above the torment of this world and grant us the grace to pray for those who wish us harm. As we honour the past, may we put our faith in your future, for you are the source of life and hope, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. We now move to the wreath laying, where floral tributes are laid to commemorate the fallen. I invite Honourable Ron Mark, Minister of Defence, to lay his wreath on behalf of the Government and people of New Zealand. Mrs. Kasa Harbour, Chargée d'Affaires, Embassy of Israel, on behalf of the Government and people of Israel. His Excellency Leasi Hapeli'i Tommy Scanlon, High Commissioner and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, on behalf of the Diplomatic Corps. Andrew Cumpston, Acting Australian High Commissioner, on behalf of the Government and People of Australia. Honourable Paula Bennett, on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition. Lieutenant General Tim Keating, Chief of Defence Force, and Mrs Brenda Keating, on behalf of the members of the New Zealand Defence Force and their families. Councillor Simon Marsh, on behalf of the City of Wellington. B.J. Clark, National President, Royal New Zealand Returned and Services Association, on behalf of all veterans and their families. Jacob Messrs and Hadass Mayron, on behalf of the youth of New Zealand and Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, would you all please stand for the commemoration?
e kori rātou e korohi kitia. Pēnea i E kori rātou e korohi kitia. Pēnea i tātou kua mahuine. E koro hoki rātou e ngoi kore. Aha koa pehia e ngā huatanga o te wā. I te heki ngā tu o te rā. Tai noa ki te aranga mai i te ata. Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou. Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
The chaplain will now rededicate the New Zealand Mounted Rifle Brigade plaque before giving the benediction and dismissal.
Let us pray together. We rededicate this plaque to the memory of the men of the New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade who, in their selfless service, furthered the cause of justice, peace and freedom. May it stand as a symbol of duty to our countries, to our leaders and to those we serve. May it inspire in all service above self and a commitment in all to those same ideals. For those whom we knew, for those whose memory we treasure, for those who lived and died in service to their country. Amen. Would you join with me in the benediction? In memory of those who died, may we be better men and women. And in our gratitude, may we live as those whose lives are not their own, but as those who are bought with a price. We remember those gathered from the storm of war into the peace of your presence. And we ask that that same peace may calm our fears and establish harmony among the nations and bring justice to all people. No e te atua te taitimu te taipere rere ana. Ko te timatanga tainoa ki te mutunga. Ko te mutunga tainoa ki te timatanga hau. E runga i a tātou katoa. Āmine.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's commemoration. Please remain standing for the departure of the official party. If I could ask that everybody else remain in the hall just for a moment while the book signing is being done. Thank you.